This is the AdNonTech podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am on Treaty Number 8 territory, the traditional meeting grounds and gathering places of our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdNonTech podcast. I'm Matt Stranick, and we have over adjacent in the cube beside me here, Dr. Doug Reed. How are you doing today, Doug?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking. How are you doing?
Awesome.
How is Garfield doing there in the background?
Garf is chillaxing with his lasagna on top of planet Earth. I'm feeling like Garf has a lot to offer in terms of my thematic presence within the show, if I can put it that way, this season. And so there's a bit of a clue, I suppose, in the background here, in as much as we're talking today about learning away from your home community. And this was also put in the document as learning overseas and international flavor. That is significant in Canadian higher ed. I can certainly tell you that right now. And both of us, Doug, have had the opportunity in our careers to spend pretty significant periods of time overseas. So I guess just to start with, given where we are in season 4, the 4th episode now, we've covered a lot of issues to do with educator morale, school morale, administration, and the like. I guess I can just ask you, Doug, what is the impetus behind this particular topic relative to where we're going today?
In the last couple of episodes that we've recorded, morale has been such a key component of where I was headed, because that's where my brain was. And now I thought, okay, what's the expansion of that? Because I moved from Nova Scotia, Canada to Alberta, Canada, and a bunch of what we talked about was in Alberta. And it was such a different culture. And then when I went to do my PhD in Western Australia, that was a different culture again. And then I thought, oh, I wasn't just learning there, because I was also teaching. So I can't separate the teaching and learning components of it. And then I started to do, let's do study abroad, right? Because I studied abroad. And then it was, wait, that's not right. Then it's like learning internationally and trying to find stuff on that, because there is international education is a whole discipline. So then I thought, is it study overseas? And all the study overseas stuff was all very colonial, rich people going back to the continent to do their studies. And then it was just learning away from your home community, because the culture shock between Nova Scotia and Alberta 30 years ago shocked me. And I'm a Canadian. I was still using the same money, still driving on the same side of the road, still, right? It was all the same shops and stuff, but the culture was so different. And I learned so much that I would not have learned otherwise. So that's where it came from. It was taking a look at the opportunities that arise when you move.
Well, that's a really positive way of framing it, Doug, I have to say. And looking at this from the standpoint of educators who might be working overseas, because certainly that's a strong factor, I suppose, in contemporary employment as an educator. If you are coming out of a B.Ed program, it is a strong possibility unless you really have strong local connections or you are just committed to remaining in place, that you will, in fact, have to go somewhere else to practice as a teacher. And similarly, if you're a student, it's very likely that if you have a particular kind of program in mind, that you will, if you really want to be serious about it, end up going to a different location to study away. And so I've certainly had those experiences myself, both as a student and as a teacher. So to me, this really tracks, this resonates. So appreciate the timely topic here, Doug.
Thanks. Thanks. I had my first big shock with international or overseas learning was when I was doing my master's at University of Calgary, where you did your doctorate.
Yeah.
And one of my wasn't a classmate, but was also doing their master's at the same time. He owned an international school in Thailand.
Oh wow.
Because that's how it works. And his website was rubbish, and I was big into that back then. That was part of my ed tech degree. So I rebuilt his website for him. And one page I thought was horrible, right? I was like, why is this page here? And it was whatever, like the Who Are We page. And there was all these really cruddy versions of like headshots of the staff, of the teachers. And it looks like somebody took a pair of scissors and cut out photos and scanned them somehow. And I'm like, let's get rid of that. That's rubbish. And he's like, that's the most important part. Because there's nothing more important on the webpage than that, not even the phone number. And I'm like, why? And it's like, we need our parents of our students to see those faces. Those faces are the most important thing. And I'm like, I don't get it. He goes, I know you don't, but they have to stay. And if you can make that look better, please do. So I made it look better, but it was just wacky. Like the whole marketing component of here's what we offer and how, and the importance of what those faces represented just was outside the scope of my thinking and knowledge before that. So that I enjoyed it, and it was shocking. I just love learning new stuff, right? Part of being a lifelong learner is like, oh, wow, there's an epiphany for me. Okay, good to know. There's a whole other world there that I don't know everything about. So let's jump in. And I know you taught in a couple of different places.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, what you were describing puts me in the mind of my time in South Korea, my first teaching experience per se. I went there, I turned 29 years old in Seoul, South Korea. So that kind of dates me a bit. I was sort of a late entrant to being a teacher as far as it goes. And culture shock was a huge part of it. But I also just learned such a huge amount, not just from being in the role of being a teacher, but from just being in those surroundings, having to face the challenges of being very far away from home. And in terms of the headshots on your colleague's webpage, that very much is in keeping with the Asian experience, I suppose, of private education, wherein you are trying to market very professional, very we have the best Westerners working at this place, and
Yes.
it helps build a brand. It helps, I guess, differentiate between others who are offering similar and the same kinds of services, educational services in those areas. So I appreciate the anecdote there. That definitely is in keeping with my experience. At Qatar, not as much. It was sort of a different thing where I was working at a Canadian institution which was operating in the Middle East, and that was completely its own experience. Likely we'll have the chance to speak to that again within the episode, but that's it's all been very formative to me, and it's still on my CV, all of it. So it's definitely something that I learned a lot from.
Right on. Now, I was surprised as I dug in the history of going abroad to study. Like,
Right.
yeah, I know it's there. I knew it was a thing, and I know it's something that rich people would send their oldest sons off to. Oh, go to Italy to learn the classics, or go to Greece and learn the whatever that happens to be. But I found an article from 1879, so
1879.
150
Way
years
back
ago.
in the Wayback Machine. Yeah.
Near Iker is 1879, studying art abroad and how to do it cheaply. So this person wrote a book on, okay, so you're going to go study art and you're going to go do it in Europe. If you go to this city, right, here's where you can get the good supplies. Here's where you can go to find a place to live with nice light. And they broke it down that way. And there's a couple of references in this book about, oh yeah, plenty of people are talking about all this other stuff. We're not going to do that. So it was a common discourse 150 odd years ago to talk about studying abroad. And it was the overseas part really shocked me. It's like, oh, I'm studying overseas. And it's like, wow, that's an arrogant colonizer kind of attitude, right? I just didn't like how it got phrased, right? It just struck me nowadays. But one of their quotes is, there's no longer the same necessity for crossing the Atlantic for an education that existed some years ago. And it's like, oh, wow, okay, so this is a very North American going to the continent to get the real education, the proper education. But they also mention women to such, especially if women are going. Here's some notes and suggestions. So it's like, okay, we're at the phase 150 years ago where now women are going abroad as well. It's not just men. This is the first reference I can find that's, and I'm assuming they're still rich or still well off or well to do, but at least it's not just white men. There's at least another part of the demographic doing it.
More broadly inclusive than you might expect for the time.
Yes. And it was really neat with like the modus operandi is like, here's how you set up in a foreign city. Here's where you go. Here's what you look for. Here's how you do it. Here's the language that they use. And it was almost like a Lonely Planet guide to going to another country. It's like, because you open up Lonely Planet, it's like, oh, go to see this thing and this thing and that thing. I don't know if Lonely Planet's still a book. I know 20, 30 years ago it was, but I don't know if the web's just taken over all that. But I just found it interesting that it's being written about then.
And pre-digital, right? So everything's analog, everything's actually the I guess privilege that you've kind of described, the level of leisure that's been described that would be necessary for folks to do this. It all sort of deals with knowledge as being a quantifiable commodity, which found in these books had some social status and economic status associated with the access to even review those materials, make proper use of them, and execute on them. So a lot going on there, really. I remember the Lonely Planet guides, as you described. I definitely picked up the Lonely Planet for South Korea when I was on my way. I went to chapters or whatever the equivalent of chapters would have been at the Regent Mall, Fredericton, New Brunswick, and picked that up when I was preparing to head overseas. I think I probably bought one for Qatar as well when that time in my life came around, which actually was pretty close to the Korea time, and found them useful, found them helpful, sure. So a precursor to this with the Nerker, if you will.
Yeah. I just found that interesting, and I just wanted to set it up so even 150 years ago, it wasn't just men. There's a piece I didn't put in here, which I found like the practicality. They said, when you're going over to the continent, because of course that means Europe, bring a lot of old undergarments. Don't buy new undergarments. Bring old undergarments. And they said, and here's why. If you go to London, the pollution there will destroy all your clothing. You're going to need to replace them in 6 months anyway. If you go to Paris, the chemicals that they use, and they name the chemical, whatever. I'm not good with chemical names. And he said the chemical they use in their cleaning will destroy your clothes in 4 months. So you're going to have to replace them all anyway. So don't spend a whole lot of money before you go with these, because they're going to be destroyed in no time. And since you're an artist, you can use your undergarments. They make great rags for cleaning your paintbrushes. And it was awesome. It was like that touch of, I can't believe somebody wrote that. But it was a how-to guide. I really enjoyed it, though.
Use.
Yeah. Actual tips you could use, and they're describing the conditions as, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was just lovely.
Well, that is absolutely descriptive par excellence. And now I think we're jumping more than a century forward here. I see that we don't have even anything from the 20th century. We're going all the way to the 21st century with Hahn, Jameson, and Young from 2000. And this is, I wouldn't expect otherwise from the Australian literature. And apart even from your significant lived experience with the Australian education system as a learner and as an educator, I have to think that the folks who are based in Australia have a huge amount of experience, because I think Australia probably exports a lot of folks for their view of traveling overseas. It would be rather different than, say, the North American viewpoint, if I'm thinking correctly.
Yeah, that would be very fair. And one reason why I jumped 129 years is because this is right around the time I moved to Australia. I started my PhD in 2001. So I just love the Australian perspective, because that's when I lived there. And one thing about, I also have nieces and nephews that went through university during COVID, and they got ripped off because everything was at home. I learned more in my undergrad outside of class than I did inside of class. Right? I learned my independence. I didn't know that people got divorced. I thought that was a TV thing. I had never met a divorced person or children of divorced people until I got to university. That's how sheltered I was. So it was just those life experiences that I got to learn and grow and those types of activities. And the Hahn, Jameson, and Young article, Schooling in Rural New South Wales, the Experience of Overseas Students, they talk about that. Like the people that came, they appreciated the freedom of living alone, of being less controlled in their everyday life by their family and their home community, being in a friendly environment, getting a quality education. Like, they love all of that stuff. And in Australia especially, they took advantage of a diverse range of opportunities that were not available in other countries. Right? If you want to be almost killed by a poisonous spider, you have to go to Australia. Right? I don't know another place where that fear happens. Right? Do you want to run by poisonous snakes? Okay, go for a jog in the bush in Australia. That's where you get to do it. And they are friendly and happy and positive and optimistic, at least when I was there. So it was people coming out of their home community saying, what else do we got going on here? How else can this work? And I just loved, and especially with the New South Wales part, because that's where I was a professor when I was a tenured academic, was doing all that.
Well, I guess this is something which, just from the descriptors of what these students reported, tends to align with what I've experienced here in Fort McMurray, especially, in as much as when I worked at the post-secondary institution in this city for one full academic year, the majority of my students in all the classes that I taught, the significant majority, I understand it was different in other programs, but in the English classes that I taught, very much international students, very much a large population from Africa continent and from South Asia, right? If we're talking about the Middle East, if we're talking about India and places like that. So the kinds of benefits that the students enjoyed would generally, I think, relate to the same kinds of factors that are pointed out here. Similarly, when I was in Korea as an educator, completely new to being a teacher, completely new to being really anywhere outside of Eastern Canada, it was the chances to do new things in one of the largest cities in the world, Seoul, South Korea, and then contrasted with what was available in the rural areas, where I also spent pretty significant amount of time. My wife at the time, she was from South Korea, so I kind of got to experience the city, the urban, but then also some absolutely unique mountain scaling and, I mean, not climbing, but hiking,
Yep.
significant hiking and all kinds of just really awesome stuff in those rural environments as well. So, as you referenced with your undergrad experience, I mean, I actually stayed in my home community pretty much entirely for my undergrad, but it was during this sort of post undergrad, pre master's kind of period where I really have my mind opened to a lot of human activity, the human condition, settings, situations, personalities that I just wouldn't have experienced otherwise. So I definitely have a wider perspective for having done so. And I think a lot of the factors that are described there in the Hahn, Jameson, and Young probably, I think, applied to my perspective while I was a teacher over there, not as a student. So appreciate pointing that one out.
Another thing is what undergrads, if they move into residence or if they move to another town, even if it's close to them, they're going to do a lot of the same things. They're going to either live alone or live with people they've just met or something. They're going to have less, they're going to be less controlled in their everyday lives because they are out of their community. Most university environments I found have been very friendly to students, right? You can find the different clubs, you can find the different teams, you can find the different people that have different interests than what you're used to, and you are getting a quality education. But when you take all that and put it into a different context, like in Australia, at the institution I went to, Edith Cowan University, I was shocked with the difference from University of Calgary. Because in the University of Calgary, you'd walk around campus and you talk to somebody, and they're like, "Oh, where do you study?" "Oh, I'm over in the education tower," right? And not the education block, and not the law building, not the, and everything had a name. In Australia, all the buildings on campus had numbers, right? "Oh, I'm in building 32. I'm in building 21." It was so easy to get around. Like if you're going to that part, like you're giving people directions. Yeah, you want to go to building 18. Well, where's that? It's between building 17 and building 20, right? It's head in that direction. You'll find it. It's not read every damn name on every building to try to see where you could get to. They just had a different way of navigating and a different way. And that was just completely normal. Even like when I went to Acadia, I got a university ring for graduating. That was a thing that mattered to my family, so I got one. And I went to do my PhD and thought, okay, I'll get a university ring from here. Oh yeah, that's not a thing. that doesn't exist. They're like, oh no, that's a North American thing. We don't do that. I managed to find like a $10 pewter ring that looked like it took about 10 minutes for somebody to hammer out. And so I have that, and I think I've worn it twice, and it hurt my finger so much that I don't wear it. But it's just these different cultures and different contexts for what is a similar learning opportunity in the classroom. So I love all that different learning stuff that happens.
Absolutely.
So
Well,
I
and
wanted. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry. No.
After you.
I was just going
Only
to
to
jump to the
say,
next one.
yeah. Well, let's go for it. Yeah, I was
Okay.
going to say we have some bullet points here, and we also have a table, a glorious looking table, I have to say, with this Ruperti 2009. The table and the bullet points are both from Ruperti here, correct?
Yes. It's all from Tanizaki and the Way of Art. And this is where I really started. I started with a Gaido. I was looking up Gaido and what that meant because it came across one of my feeds with, oh, Gaido is a great way to go. You should have a look at this. And it was a Japanese way to approach learning in the 1920s and the 1930s, leading up to the rise of the imperial war machine that became Japan. And so I went looking at it and I was like, oh, maybe we should do an episode on that. And then when I saw it was so tied to like ultra nationalism and controlling people and putting messages across, I was like, nope, I am not interested. There's enough of that going on in the world right now. But that opened me up to, oh, what are other things that are happening and how we're doing it. But this article by Ruperti in 2009 took a look at students that studied abroad, and they looked at the length of time people studied abroad. Like, did they study abroad for a couple of weeks? Did they stay for a semester? Did they stay for a year? What did they do? And when I saw the diagram, the chart, I was like, oh yeah, that is glorious. That needs to go in because it's nice and clear. They're not doing chi-squares on stuff. They're just reporting percentages. And so I think that's more open and welcoming to people that haven't done advanced stats, basically.
Always love a good, clear, descriptive table.
Yes. And one thing they found is they went longitudinally to the students studying, and they said 46% of students that did a study abroad in their study went on to do higher degrees, went on to do other graduate degrees like masters or PhDs. And they said the longer you did your study abroad, the more likely it was you were going to end up doing a PhD at some point. And it was more than doubled. So if you spent a semester abroad, that's one thing. If you spent a year abroad, you more than doubled the odds that you were going to go do a PhD. And part of that may not be, oh, you learned more about other cultures. It might be, oh yeah, you have the financial backing. You have the opportunity to spend a chunk of your life doing that. Or you might have other opportunities. So they didn't really get into those numbers. But they did take a look at it. And they said the longer people stayed in their host country, they built better relationships that lasted the test of time, because lasting relationships take time to develop. Like if I go to a conference and we chat and have a cup of tea and maybe go for a drink or something, right? That's very different than we're spending a year together studying the same materials or living across from each other on campus or something. So another thing that they found is that the longer people stayed in another country, they achieved greater understanding of their own cultural values and biases, which I found really surprising and not surprising at the same time, because there was some things that's like, yeah, I really appreciate Canada for X, Y, and Z. These things that I was learning. And it allowed you to have a more sophisticated way of looking at the world. Right? There's nothing better than saying, yeah, okay, I've lived that experience. Now let's dig deeper. That might just be me, because I have to dig deeper. That's just the way my brain operates. I'm wondering, do you have some experiences similar to that when you were teaching and doing a lot of learning at the same time?
Yeah, well, a couple of things that you said kind of resonated for me. First of all, being in close proximity to others who are in similar circumstances. We interviewed Dr. Lee Smith for the Ed Non-Tech interviews. He's somebody who's made basically most of his career, most of his career as an educator overseas, him and his wife, Deanna. He's been a principal of Canadian chartered schools, BC curriculum, over in China, and he's done all kinds of stuff. We first met when I was in Korea, and he had, I think at that point, about 10 years, 5 to 10 years anyway, as a professional teacher, whereas I was just on year zero. And he's just sort of, Lee and Deanna both are examples of people that, even though it was 20 years ago, basically, we're still in contact. And I still personally value those two as friends and as colleagues, even though we haven't seen each other in person in 15 years for sure, probably longer. So this is something where um, I can see what you're sort of referring to there. And I think just in terms of like what I would aspire for my kids are both teenagers now. One of them's got less than 2 years left in high school, and we're now sort of working together to figure out what his interests are and what opportunities he may want to pursue for post secondary. And really, if either of my kids shows a willingness or interest to go somewhere else within Canada or outside of Canada for their further education or a part of their further education, I'm going to do everything I can to try and find some opportunities to go with that. Just because travel really does add to your perspective of your home community, so that when you come back, you are, as you say, able to look at things with a bit more nuance, able to look at things with a more sophisticated, I suppose, understanding of how what's going on locally fits into a wider context, which you may not necessarily get if you sort of remain in the same area. And so my entire career has been characterized by one move after another, variously. At this point, I've lived most places, most regions of Canada. I haven't lived in northern Canada, but besides that, I've covered most geographic regions of Canada, as well as Qatar, as well as South Korea. And every one of those contexts is different. When you were talking before about your experience doing your master's in Calgary, I, again, for me, going to Ontario was a huge difference. I really actually suffered a bit from what they call reverse culture shock when I was coming back from Qatar and working in an Ontario university. I ended up there for 3 years, and it was awesome. But the first 6 months were really just like, how do I even fit back into a regular Canadian context? Never mind a place in Canada that I haven't been before, that I haven't spent any time. And it was the same thing when I moved to Kamloops. It's like, okay, this is different than Ontario significantly in these ways. And then after that, St. John, New Brunswick, where it wasn't my city, it was just down the road from my city, kind of like going home, but not exactly. And then going to Fort McMurray, totally something else. So I appreciate that I've been able to take something away from each of these places. There's also a significant adjustment period in going into those places. So I think you've sort of captured all of that in your remarks as well.
Yeah. To build upon that, when I got my BED, I was like, okay. I realized how little I knew, and I knew I was going to need experience to get better at teaching and stuff. The first day I got there, they handed me these binders and said, here's the Alberta curriculum that you have to teach. And I had a 2-year BED. we had mentioned the word curriculum, but I had never seen a curriculum document. I had never seen, here's the outcomes for all these different disciplines. And I walk into the Alberta context and it's like, your lesson plans have to include what learning outcome you're addressing in this lesson. And I was like, oh no, what is this? Like it just didn't matter in the same way. And I learned very quickly how much it mattered in my new context. But that was just one of the culture shock kind of things that we covered. Now to go to this table, the curriculum. Yeah, aligning with the curriculum did not get mentioned. I have no memory of it. And I still have some of my notes. And I went back and looked at my notes back in the day. And they mentioned the word curriculum, but it was like, oh, yeah. It was a brush off. There was never, here's the curriculum documentation that you're going to have to address to walk into a classroom.
It was a legalistic kind of standard, right?
Yeah. Well, one really neat thing with the Rupardi article is they talk about the longer people impacts that some people had. And one was influences subsequent educational experiences. Everybody that did any sort of study abroad in this study, 84% of them said, oh yeah, that flavored all the rest of the educational experiences I had in my life, which I see as a positive. It's like, yeah, we tried something new, we learned from it, and we grew from there. And it's like, wow, that's fantastic. And that's up to like 91. The people that stayed for a year, 91% of the people said, oh yeah, this absolutely impacted my learning for the rest of my life. The other one I really liked was studying abroad reinforced commitment to foreign language study. And that was massive. The lowest of all the categories was 83%, because we're pretty monolingual. In my growing up, we were, right? It was like, oh, those French people, don't worry about that. I took French, but there was just that divide. Like learning another language wasn't necessary. And then you go to other countries. I have a buddy of mine from China. He's like, oh yeah, I speak 18 languages. And they're all derivations of Mandarin and Cantonese and stuff, but they're 18 different languages. I have friends from Finland. And it's like, oh yeah, they speak 6. And I have English and like Pidgin French and a couple of phrases of Gaelic. Right? I just don't have the same structure. And even in English, I only had like the Canadian dialect of English. And when I moved to Australia, one thing I picked up was a dictionary. I picked up the Dinkum Dictionary, and this is what Australian words mean. And because I needed to know. I had a friend of mine I was chatting with after work one day, and she said, oh, I had a blue at work. And I was like, you had a beer? Why were you drinking at work? Because for me, blue is Labatt's Blue, the beer.
Oh, okay.
And she's like, no, I had a fight. And I'm like, how was that blue? It's like, and then we broke it down. It took 10 minutes, but it's like blue language. The sensors for radio and TV and stuff, blue language. They had a blue grease pencil to say, nope, can't use that word. And that somehow in that dialect got turned to fight, because when you see a cartoon with all the squiggles and the symbols, you know that's a fight, or that's negative, or that's whatever. And that's blue language. So and it was like, oh, I have to go back and learn the history of these words and where they came from. Like I had a friend of mine come up one time and say, oh, I'm so chuffed today. And I'm like, is that bad? What does chuffed mean? I was in my 30s. I had never heard that word before. And it was a common word. I was marking a class one time, and I had like 57 students, and they had to do these assignments. And the first 15 assignments, people used the word learnt, Learnt. And I crossed through and said, the word is learned. That is not in common usage. And after 15, I'm like, oh, I'm wrong. It's not them, it's me. So I had to go back and like, sorry, didn't understand. Sorry, didn't understand. And even when I hand the assignments back, it's like some of you are going to have markup comments on the word learned. I said, where I come from, that is not a word that gets used. So I apologize. It did not affect your grade, and I feel bad because I didn't know it. And they just laughed. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Yeah, we know you're from Canada. It's not a big deal. But it's just those learning experiences and picking up the different dialects and picking up the different values of knowing about language really mattered. And I love the fact that Ruparty picked up on that.
Well, that is awesome. And it does put me just in the mind somewhat of, I feel like I may have missed a bit of an opportunity in South Korea to learn the Korean language. I think it's something where, had we committed to staying there for longer, then I may have drilled down and picked it up. But like when I was in Qatar, it was very similar in as much as with Korea, they would have the local language like Hangul or Arabic, respectively, on the major signage, but they also had the Romanized versions on the same signs, right? Not necessarily English, but just so that anybody with a Roman alphabet as their background, so the European and derived languages, it almost made it so that they were in their local areas trying to make sure that people would be able to get around, navigate. And the expectation was that if you were going to be in Korea as a Korean person, you learned English because it was the international language of business, really. And anybody, just about anybody, even in the malls, even in the stores, probably it would have been different in the smaller cities, but at least in Seoul, you could sort of get through a conversation, your pidgin, phrases of Korean, their pidgin, whatever phrases of English. Um, there was a lot of expats when I was there who just did not feel the necessity to learn the local language really at all in both those countries, and I was among that cohort. I feel like it may have been a bit of a missed opportunity. It definitely was, but at the same time, you have so much else going on around you. You have so much to get used to that a full-on language study didn't necessarily seem like the best thing to devote one's energy to, although it would have been very personally enriching to do so. So I feel like I would have these students here at Keano, the institution I just kind of finished up with, they would be there. And honestly, they impressed me very much with their, because they have to take language proficiency tests to get in and everything. Mm-hmm. And even though there were some differentiated sort of ideas of what certain phrases meant, it was really something where they made it a priority to become proficient with English, the local language. So I think that kind of may speak to the colonial aspect a bit, where people from North America or English speaking parts of Europe generally don't have to go too far outside that particular comfort zone. And I think that's maybe one of the tensions a bit, which is going on relative to this topic.
Along the line with the colonial thing, years ago, we interviewed Dr. Norm Vaughan last summer, whatever it was, a year or so ago. And he and I had went to a conference in Greece, in the Isle of Rhodes, ICTE. And they have this partnership with the Ministry of Education there, and it is fantastic. Oh my goodness. But anyway, I flew into Athens, got a room by the port because I was going to take the boat. I didn't want to fly. I wanted to take the boat and experience the Aegean and stuff. And I had a couple of hours. And I was like, well, I'm going to the Parthenon. And so it's Greece. It's like, come on, it's Europe. How can I? Well, they don't use the Latin alphabet. I'm pretty sure they used the Cyrillic alphabet with 32 letters, not 26 letters. They did not have the English or the French or the Spanish versions of anything. So I get on the train, the subway, and I've had to memorize the stop to get off to go to the Parthenon. And it's like, okay, it's either 3 or 4 stops. Okay, I can do this. I can manage. And you're on the subway, right? And you come up, and the doors open, and there's the name, and it's like, oh, okay, I don't think that's it. I don't think that's it. Eventually, I'm 7 stops on. And it's like, I've gone too far. And then I had like a 3-kilometer hike through Athens because it's the only hill. The Parthenon's the only hill in the city. So I get out and I'm looking around, and sure enough, right? Yeah, there's the hill way back there. But they didn't translate it into the 26-letter alphabet I'm used to. And it's like, wow, okay, I need to get my act together. And I felt a little dumb, but it was like, okay, I have to pay more attention to, because every stop name literally had a dozen characters. Like all the names were so long. It just made me, because I'm like, okay, I'm in Europe. How different can it be? And it's like very, very different.
You have to be situationally aware. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just wasn't. So it was a great learning opportunity for me. And I was in fine shape, right? My knees and hips didn't hurt. I could walk the 3 kilometers, and I didn't have a problem. So I must have went through a nice-ish part of town. I don't know. I made it there. So, but now I have the story, and I didn't go to the front where normally people come because they come out of the subway and go right up. I ended up on this back way, and it was like this little what used to be a goat path to get up to the top. And so that's always interesting to have those life experiences. But
sounds fantastic. And when you're younger relative to being an adult, you just have the time in front of you to take those digressions. And in a lot of ways, the digressions are what ends up making the trip memorable.
Yes.
Anthony Bourdain, the famous late TV host and author, in his TV presentations always sort of emphasized that they were going to go not to the best or most famous or most well-regarded restaurant in whatever city they were filming in. They were going to make a point of going all the way out into the boonies somewhere to this local noodle spot that the workers would go to or what have you, because it was a more authentic representation of the local culture. That's something that from the pop culture there that kind of speaks to the topic a bit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I would like to jump to Fox Byrne and Vern Davis.
Absolutely.
The educational impact of experience overseas. And this is from a medical journal. So this is a slight twist on it.
That's cool.
And apparently there's a lot of people that do their studies in other countries. They get their medical degree and then they go study elsewhere as they go through everything. And they came away with 3 big findings. Basically everybody said, wow, we appreciate some of the things that happen in our home communities and in our home nation. We appreciate the structure of how this works. And a lot of them return home because of the differences. It's like, no, I prefer this because it's like, okay, good. But now you know, right? It's not just I'm accepting it because I don't know any better. You've had a chance to take a look. You've had a chance to reflect and think about it. And then you made a decision. I'm always happy when people are open-minded and they make decisions based on information and knowledge. I really like that.
Totally.
Another part is the recognition of the importance of work-life balance. Because there are some places where work-life balance is not a priority. So being able to go to other communities and say, this is what work-life balance looks like. It's like, oh, okay, this does matter. And it's not a matter of telling doctors like, oh yeah, go learn yoga, go learn how to meditate. That'll be your work-life balance. It's like, no, it's more than that. And participants' overseas experience left them more mature and better able to deal with the pressures of postgraduate training. So they go overseas and they learn in a different context, and then they come back, and then all they have to do is learn. They don't have to learn in the different context. So they get to come back, and it's kind of like when you run. When you go out and you do a bit of running and you get very humbled the first time or the second time or the third time, but eventually you don't notice because you've just expanded your capabilities. So doing learning and in a different context in another country expands your capabilities. Then you come home, you don't have to worry about the separate context, but you still expanded your capabilities, and that makes the additional learning back home even easier.
You have more bandwidth, you have more flexibility available in your thinking, just because every day it's a different situation, every day it's a different kind of challenge that you have to navigate just to do your basic stuff.
Yeah. And you get used to it. It's for years. Like I'm a yoga instructor, right? I have my piece of paper that lets me teach yoga. I have whatever the 200-hour. There's 200-hour training and 500-hour training. I have the 200-hour training because I'm
You do
busy.
collect certifications, you
I collect
mentioned.
certifications, but one thing I've never enjoyed is all the one-legged poses. Right? Like sometimes my balance is awesome. I can balance for a minute or two, no problem on one foot. And other times I'm 5 seconds in and I'm as wobbly as can be. And I've been reading some stuff saying, hey, if you want to be healthier later in life, learn how to stand on one foot. So I've been trying that. Like when I brush my teeth, because when you brush your teeth, you're just kind of standing there brushing your teeth in front of a mirror. Normally it's like balance on one foot while you're brushing your teeth. And that's just a little bit of practice every day. It builds the muscle. It builds the nerve connections. It builds that part of your brain. And it's like, yeah, let's give it a go. It costs me nothing to stand on one leg and brush my teeth, right? It's a couple of minutes a day. So it's just try something new.
Incremental increases. Very
Yeah.
much like with running, where you just build up your capacity, couple of kilometers at a time, adding to it, and then eventually you got your 20K plus behind you, right?
Yeah. And that's how it works. You want to go out today and run? Like we're doing the Terry Fox run tomorrow because they're closing down the Confederation Bridge. So we're actually going to go and be able to walk on the bridge. And normally that doesn't happen. Normally the bridge doesn't have a walking opportunity to it. So we're doing the Terry Fox run just based other than to support Terry Fox's goals and dreams and stuff because that really matters. But the other component is we get to walk on the bridge because normally we drive on the bridge, right? I'm a passenger trying to look over the concrete barriers that we're driving past. I want to walk and see the view and then say I've done it. So
how long is the Confederation Bridge?
Just over 13K.
13K. That's significant.
So there's a couple of options. You can park on the PEI side and run to New Brunswick, or you can park on the New Brunswick side and run to PEI, or you can do a shorter distance. And they have kilometer markers set up. So you can park on the PEI side and walk a kilometer or two and then turn around and come back just to be on the bridge to help raise money for cancer research. But
a unique opportunity, culturally speaking, as well as, of course, the obvious, highly worthwhile goal of supporting Terry Fox Foundation.
Yeah, it's been 10 years since they've closed it down for people to walk on. And the bridge is only, 25, 26 years old. So this does not happen often. So, but there is no way I could run across it right now with the state that my knee is in. I'm getting better, but I can't do 13K. It's just not going to happen.
Knowing your limitations, that's important.
Yes. And I enjoy being able to walk without a limp. So I'm going to
maintain that practice.
I'll build it.
Yeah.
I'll build to where I'm going, but it's one of those things. Now, this last article is Stasel 2021, and it's Educator Acculturation While Living and Working Overseas. And what they did, and this is a dissertation, and again, I love dissertations. because they put
Totally.
everything in the kitchen sink in there. They have to put everything in there to prove that they can do all the research, and it's not just in slicing it to get it in a journal or a conference paper or something. And they talk about flourishing, and it's like flourishing can be linked with acculturation, and acculturation happens when you're in a different culture, and it's not just being in a different culture, but accepting and being willing to learn and grow in the culture. Because I know people that have gone to other countries and they basically stay in their residence unless they're going to work or unless they're going to class, and then they go right back to the residence and they don't do anything. When I was in Australia, I did everything. It was like I learned how to sail, right? I did a whole pile of running. I learned how to swim in the ocean with the big waves. I learned how to do abseiling and rappelling. Like I learned all the things. I did everything I possibly could because my brain 5 days a week was so busy with PhD stuff. The rest of the time was do anything else, right? It's wander down to the shops to see what wacky baked goods are there, whatever it was. And I learned I didn't like Australian baked goods because it wasn't nearly sugary enough, but that's my own thing. But Stazzle talks about how a cultural phenomena can provide growth opportunities. And it's like anything else, right? If you're open to new opportunities, magically they appear. If you're not open, they don't appear. So when you're in another culture, there's definitely stuff that is going to pop up that is different than what you probably expected. And along with that is how proud people are when they do new stuff. Like the first time, I have a picture of the first time I was in charge of a sailboat. It was a little teeny dinghy. It was about, 3 meters, not even 3 meters long. And the person doing the instruction was in another boat. I have the biggest smile on my face. They took a picture and I was just so happy. Look at this. I've got the sail going. We haven't tipped over. We're just so happy, so proud of what I've done. And that's now become like a lifelong learning experience. I can't wait to get another boat here and do more of it. But it's one of those things like, how do I jump in?
Yeah, and I think that must have enhanced the quality of your study, the time that you took away for personal objectives elevated your ability, enhanced your ability for what you were there for, ostensibly for the program. And it's sort of a feeder kind of relationship. One sort of digs into the other, where your purpose enhances your personal stuff while you're there, and the personal stuff elevates the quality of what you're doing. In Korea, the trips, going hiking in the mountains, going to the border with North Korea, going to these restaurants, these out of the way kind of spots, really seeking to go beyond the main thoroughfare, definitely added to the value of those experiences and set me up later on when I was in Qatar and I suppose in other places of Canada, a mentality of looking for what the unique opportunities the place had to offer above and beyond simply the purpose of working there. And once you get in the habit of that exploration, then you keep that habit and you bring it with you. So wherever you go, it's part of your mentality. And as you say, opportunities begin to arise that you might not have anticipated otherwise.
And you never would have imagined. It's like, okay, that's just not a possibility where I grew up. I grew up on the Bay of Fundy. People don't sail on the Bay of Fundy. It is mud flats as far as the eye can see. And with the tide being so high, sailboats just really didn't exist anywhere near me. And literally the salt water was less than 2 kilometers from my house, from where I grew up, but nobody sailed there. It just wasn't the way it was.
Maritimer went to Australia to learn to sail.
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly it. And then figured out how to sail in Edmonton, Alberta. And they had a thriving sailing culture there. It's small, but it's thriving. They have an Olympic champion there. That's from there. They have, the Pierre de Coubertin medal in the Olympics, right? You gold, silver, bronze, and then every once in a while they give out a medal for sportsmanship to say this is what the Olympics is about.
Okay.
One of those was given, I think it was in 1988, to somebody from Wabamun, Alberta, just beside Edmonton. There was a sailing race going with all those little sailboats that they've got. And he had a good chance to get a medal, like a bronze, silver, gold, whatever it was. So he's in his race, he's doing well, right? And it's not one race, right? Like you do like 7 or 13 races and they do the combined scores all the way through, and whoever has the best combined scores at the end wins. So he had a good chance for a medal, and the wind got up, and the race next to them, which was however many meters away, like half a mile away or something, he saw a boat flip in another race, and the sailors were struggling. So he didn't even give it a second thought. He abandoned his race and went over and saved them. He went over and got them both to his boat until the rescue vehicles came, right? Like the rescue boats came, but they were just so busy because of the wind squalls at the time. And as soon as the rescue boats came and got them off, he went back and finished his race, and he was like dead last. So he lost his chance to get on the podium and stuff. But people said, that's what the Olympics are about. And people interviewed him like, oh, aren't you so sorry that you lost your chance to win a gold? He goes, this is a sport. Those people were going to die, right? It was not a tough decision for me. It's like, I'm here to compete and do my best, but I couldn't live with myself if they died.
You're a human first and an Olympian second.
Yeah. So they gave him this medal because it was like, yeah, this is what we're about. This is what matters. So I found sailing cultures after I left the Maritimes, but it's one of those things that if I hadn't done it in Australia, I had lived in and around Edmonton for 8 years before then, didn't even look at it, didn't even know that it had been there for 100 years. But as soon as I came back, you're darn tootin' I went to find it. So it's just having
thriving
that
culture.
Yeah. So that's what I have for articles.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we are, I think, at the point where we can safely look at some of these visuals. These are some unique ones. I've not seen any Dilberts here this time, but
Nope.
One thing that you got here is corner gas. What's the impetus with that one, pal?
So the last couple of episodes, I was very text heavy in the images. They were like quotes from Instagram and stuff. And when I was away, when I was in Australia, corner gas started here. And it was huge. Like I came back for a visit, and that's all everybody was talking about. That and the Trailer Park Boys. Both of those started when I was away. And I was a Nova Scotian, so I was like a Maritimer, and I'd moved to Alberta, so I had some ties there. And then when I left to Australia, I became Canadian because Saskatchewan was that tall, skinny province that was super easy to draw on a map, right? It's like 4 straight lines and you're done. But when I'm in Australia, it's like, okay, corner gas is Canadian. I'm going to like it. And I didn't need to be convinced. It was great. And this was part of me changing from a Maritimer to a Canadian. Like that shift happened because I went
distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, it was part of that. And then when Corner Gas animated, the cartoon came out, they had all these pictures that you could put on the backgrounds for your online calls, your Zoom calls or team calls or Skype calls or whatever. So I grabbed one, and it's just like, this typifies the change in my growth from Maritimer to Canadian. And I had to leave the country to do that, to have that growth kind of happen.
I definitely never felt more Canadian than when I was living in the Middle East. I can completely relate to that statement, and I'm glad you brought it up. And who doesn't like corner gas? Come on. I mean, I haven't watched a ton of it, but highly well-regarded show. What
Yeah.
else do we have here? We got a few.
I have a few. The one I really want to talk about is the last one about the quokkas. I don't know if you know what a quokka is.
I don't, but the picture makes them look charming as heck.
Yes. There is, Australia has a lot of marsupials, right? Like kangaroos and wallabies and stuff. And a small subset of marsupials are quokkas. And they only live in one island. And it's off the coast of Western Australia, just off of Fremantle. It's like 14 kilometers from the coast. And they have been separated from mainland Australia for a very long time. Very long time. They have no natural predators on the island. It's them. And seabirds land and stuff. But so they're super, super cute. And now Rottnest Island it was one of the first places the Dutch found. Like when the Dutch didn't land in Western Australia, they kind of sailed by, like the Dutch East India Company, to see if there was anything there. And they saw this island, and they saw all these little guys when they were looking, checking out what was there. And they said, oh, those are giant rats. We're not going to stop there. And they weren't rats. They were quokkas that are marsupials. And they are so nice and so friendly because they don't have any fear because they're not used to it. And now there's like restaurants on the island and like places to like cabins for people to stay. And I would scuba dive off Rottnest. I saw the largest manta ray I've ever seen in my life there. But the quokkas wander around. And that's why when I saw the sign, like, don't let the quokka inside the restaurant, no matter what he tells you, because they're so, if your heart doesn't melt when you meet a quokka, there's something wrong with your heart, right? Like they're just those little things. And I remember going into a restaurant with somebody else and the quokka came in with me and I didn't mean to. And the wait staff is trying to shoo the quokka out and giving me the, what are you doing? Don't do that. It's like, sorry, I didn't realize.
On the mainland, we don't have these things there.
Yeah, we just don't. So I enjoyed that. There are a couple of other pictures there that are all have like an international, not from here, going someplace else kind of feel to it. So when you go to the website, if you want to take a look, they're absolutely there. And they all tie to new experiences elsewhere. Some are positive, some are, but whatever. They're all there.
Yeah, that's awesome. They're already posted up in the WordPress as we speak. So you're definitely going to want to check these out. Doug, does that bring us to the word, question, and phrase of the podcast by chance?
Yes. The word of the podcast is overseas or international, depending on how colonizer you want to be. The question of the podcast is, how can more people get the opportunity to embrace teaching and learning opportunities away from their home communities?
Absolutely. Awesome.
And the phrase of the podcast is became Canadian. When I stopped being a Maritimer and I became a Canadian, that was
absolutely
the shift that I came up with on this. And because it was so shocking to me. It was like, well, I was Canadian. I had a Canadian passport. I used Canadian money, right? I had a ball cap with a maple leaf on it, but it was just different. I embraced it more.
You take it for granted, yeah, until you go somewhere else, and then you realize that everything you bring with you has informed everything that you are up until that moment, and it's part of your identity, both perceived as other people will engage with you, and as you perceive yourself. It has to change in relation to the new circumstances. I have a Canadian maple leaf tattooed on my body. I got that before I left. I got that like a couple of years. I kind of knew that I was going to connect with international stuff in some way, and it was almost kind of like if I'm lost, return me here, kind of thing, right? So that's awesome, man.
Yeah, like I didn't know I walked on the wrong side of the road in other countries. Like you kind of walk, like if you're on a path or in a grocery store or whatever, you walk on the same side of the road that cars drive on. Because I was in the grocery store and it was annoying the daylights out of me because I ran into 15 people in one aisle and they're like, just go to the other side. And it's like, no, but that's not the side I walk on. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm in the wrong. I'm not there anymore. Okay,
You have to reprogram a bit.
You got to reprogram. And it was this reprogramming that helped open up the learning opportunities.
Awesome. Well, I think, Doug, that's an excellent way to go out. I don't have anything else to say to this at the moment. Excellent topic, Doug. Appreciate that as always. And appreciate everybody who's checking this out for any reason. Anything else you want to add here, Doug?
No, other than see you next time and thanks for listening.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody, and bye for now.